It all began on a quiet afternoon in a small town where everyone knew everyone else. The streets were calm, and the park in the center of town was full of children playing. Dogs running freely and families enjoying their day. Among the crowd was a young person who loved to watch people perform, but had never really imagined themselves on a stage. They were more the kind of person who enjoyed watching quietly from the sidelines, laughing at the silly antics of others and dreaming about what it might be like to step into the spotlight, even if only for a moment. That afternoon, the town had announced a small talent show that would take place in the local community center. People of all ages could join, and the event was a yearly tradition that brought everyone together. Most participants had practiced for weeks, if not months. They had polished routines, rehearsed songs, or perfected dance moves. The young person, however, had nothing prepared. In fact, the idea of actually performing made their stomach twist into knots. They had always loved to make people laugh, but the thought of standing in front of a crowd felt like stepping off a cliff. They were sitting on a bench with a few friends, watching people walk into the community center carrying instruments, costumes, and props. The friends were chatting excitedly about what they were going to do, while the young person tried to imagine themselves doing anything that wouldn't end in complete embarrassment. One of the friends nudged them and whispered, "You should join. You could do something funny. People love jokes." The idea seemed ridiculous at first. Joining a talent show without preparation, without a real performance, sounded like a recipe for disaster. But then, the young person felt a spark of mischief. What if they didn't try to impress anyone? What if they just went on stage and did something completely silly? Something so ridiculous that it would make people laugh, not because they were talented, but because it was unexpected. It was a joke, but maybe, just maybe, it could work. They started talking to their friends about it, and soon, what had begun as a quiet thought turned into a full-blown plan. The friends laughed and started suggesting absurd ideas, pretending to play an invisible piano, doing a dramatic dance while tripping over their own feet, or singing a song in a made-up language. Each suggestion was sillier than the last, and the young person laughed so hard that tears almost came to their eyes. The more they laughed, the more they realized that this could actually be fun. They didn't have to be perfect. They didn't have to be serious. They just had to be willing to be ridiculous and enjoy the moment. As the time for the talent show approached, the young person felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Their friends were all going to cheer them on, and that alone made it easier to think about stepping onto the stage. They started practicing their silly routine in secret, in front of a mirror in their bedroom. They tried out exaggerated gestures, funny faces, and clumsy movements, all the while laughing at themselves. It was unlike anything they had ever done, and the experience was both terrifying and exhilarating. Every stumble, every over-the-top motion made them feel more alive, more aware of the energy they could bring to an audience. The morning of the show arrived, and the young person could hardly eat breakfast. They kept imagining the crowd, the bright lights, and the sound of people whispering as they waited for the next act. They thought about backing out, about hiding behind their friends and pretending they had changed their mind. But then, one of their friends grabbed their hand and said, "No, you have to do this. It's going to be amazing, and if it's funny, that's even better." The encouragement gave them the push they needed. They realized that the whole point was to take a risk, to embrace the uncertainty, to have fun. At the community center, the room was buzzing with energy. Families and neighbors filled the seats, chatting and laughing. Participants were warming up, tuning instruments, and stretching. The young person's heart was racing, but they focused on their plan. They would go on stage, act completely ridiculous, and see what happened. The routine was simple, but intentionally absurd. They would exaggerate every movement, make funny faces, and interact with imaginary props, all while pretending to be a serious performer. The contrast between seriousness and silliness, they hoped, would be entertaining. When it was finally their turn, they walked backstage, feeling every nerve in their body tingle. The stage lights were bright, and for a moment, they could barely see the audience. They took a deep breath, reminded themselves that it was just a joke, and stepped onto the stage. At first, there was silence. People weren't sure what to make of the awkward, over-the-top gestures, the strange noises. and the exaggerated expressions. The young person felt a flicker of panic, but then something surprising happened. A few people in the audience started to laugh. The laughter was small at first, but it grew steadily as more people noticed the ridiculousness of the act. Encouraged by the reaction, the young person became bolder. They exaggerated every move, even more, twirling, jumping, and pretending to interact with invisible objects. They added little improvisations, acting as if a chair was suddenly alive or a hat was a wild animal. The audience was now fully engaged, laughing loudly and pointing, some shaking their heads in disbelief at how funny it was. The young person felt a surge of energy and joy. They had never imagined that doing something so silly could feel so empowering. It was as if the joke had taken on a life of its own, and they were finally free to express themselves without worrying about judgment. Backstage, their friends were cheering and laughing along with the audience, clapping and shouting words of encouragement. Seeing the positive reaction made the young person even more confident. They realized that humor could connect people in a way that skill alone sometimes could not. The routine that started as a simple, ridiculous joke was becoming a performance that people genuinely enjoyed. Every exaggerated gesture, every awkward move, every silly sound contributed to the growing excitement in the room. By the end of the act, the audience was clapping, laughing, and even standing to cheer. The young person took a dramatic bow, pretending to faint from the overwhelming success of their ridiculous performance. The applause was louder than anything they had imagined, and they felt a mix of relief, pride, and pure happiness. They had done it. They had turned a joke into an experience that everyone could enjoy, and in doing so, discovered something unexpected about themselves. They could perform, they could entertain, and they could connect with people through humor and creativity as they walked off the stage. Still laughing at the absurdity of what they had just done, they realized that this was only the beginning. What started as a joke had given them a taste of something powerful and exciting. They didn't know where it would lead, but they were ready to explore it. They had taken a risk, embraced the uncertainty, and found joy in the process. And that, they thought, was a lesson worth remembering. That evening, as the talent show continued and other participants took their turns, the young person sat with their friends, still buzzing with excitement. They talked about every moment of their performance, reliving the laughter, the surprise, and the applause. They felt proud, not because they had been perfect, but because they had dared to step outside their comfort zone and embrace the unknown. For the first time, they understood that sometimes the most unexpected choices can lead to the most memorable moments. And so, the story began not with a carefully rehearsed plan or a polished performance, but with a simple, silly idea, a joke that no one expected to succeed. Little did they know this joke would be the first step toward something extraordinary, something that would surprise everyone, including themselves. The young person went home that night tired but happy, carrying with them a spark of confidence and a newfound understanding of what it meant to take a chance, make people laugh, and discover hidden potential in the most unlikely way. As the young person stepped off the stage, they could still feel the echo of the audience's laughter and applause in their chest. Their heart was still racing, and their hands were trembling with excitement. They walked back to their friends, who immediately engulfed them in hugs and high fives. Laughing and pointing out their favorite parts of the performance, even though it had all started as a joke, it was clear that something unexpected was happening. They had captured the attention of the crowd, and the energy was electric. Sitting down at the edge of the room, they tried to catch their breath and process everything that had just occurred. People around them were still talking, smiling, and replaying what they had just seen in their minds. The young person's friends whispered to them, saying things like, "You were amazing," and "I didn't think anyone could pull that off." They laughed together, sharing a sense of disbelief that a silly, unplanned act could create such a strong reaction. The young person's mind kept replaying the performance. They remembered the moment when they had pretended the chair was alive, the way the audience had erupted in laughter when they acted as if it had attacked them, and the exaggerated fall that seemed to shock and amuse everyone at the same time. Each detail reminded them that they had truly connected with people, not because of skill, but because of authenticity and the willingness to be funny without worrying about judgment. As other participants began to take their turns on stage, the young person noticed the audience was buzzing with excitement, more engaged than usual. People were whispering, sharing their reactions, and taking videos on their phones. The energy in the room seemed to shift, and they realized that their performance had somehow changed the mood. There was more laughter, more engagement, and a sense of anticipation that hadn't been there before. The young person felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness, wondering if they had set a new standard for entertainment. Even by accident, the young person's friends urged them to watch the other acts closely. Some were incredibly skilled, playing instruments, singing, or performing rehearsed dance routines. Yet, as impressive as these acts were, the crowd's excitement didn't always match the effort. The young person began to notice a pattern. People were drawn to authenticity, to something that surprised them, and to moments that made them feel something unexpected. Their own act, despite being a joke, had delivered all of that. It was a revelation that talent wasn't only about practice and precision. Sometimes it was about connection and boldness. Backstage, the young person had a moment alone. They leaned against the wall, their hands still slightly shaking, and reflected on what had just happened. The initial fear, the nervous energy, the self-doubt, all of it had vanished in the moment of performance. They realized that stepping into the unknown, even in a small way, could create something magical. A joke, if delivered with heart and creativity, could become more powerful than they had ever imagined. The next act began, and the young person watched intently. A singer took the stage, and the crowd applauded politely, yet the energy felt quieter. The young person couldn't help but notice that while the performance was technically perfect, it didn't evoke the same laughter, surprise, or thrill that their act had. They began to understand that entertainment was more than skill. It was about storytelling, timing, and engagement. They had accidentally discovered this truth, and it fueled a new sense of excitement and curiosity within them. During a brief break, the young person wandered near the audience. Strangers came up to them, smiling, laughing, and sharing their favorite moments from the performance. Some admitted they hadn't expected to enjoy the act at all, yet it had become the highlight of the show. Others told their friends, pointing at the young person and laughing and saying how clever and fun the act was. Every reaction reinforced a growing realization. They had found a way to connect. And people loved it. The young person's friends were buzzing with energy as well. They kept replaying the performance, imitating the exaggerated gestures, and laughing uncontrollably. The shared joy was contagious, and the young person felt a deep sense of belonging and camaraderie. This was more than just a stage performance, it was an experience. A moment that brought people together in laughter and excitement. They had never thought that a simple, silly idea could have such a profound effect as the talent show continued. The young person began to think about possibilities. What if they refined the act slightly, keeping the humor, but adding small touches of timing, surprise, or subtle skill? They didn't want to lose the spontaneity, but they could see that small improvements could make the performance even more memorable. The idea was exciting, and it gave them a sense of purpose. What had started as a joke was starting to feel like an opportunity. The audience, meanwhile, was reacting in ways that surprised everyone, including the young person. Laughter mixed with genuine applause, whispers of amazement, and smiles of delight filled the room. People were taking videos, sharing stories about the performance, and eagerly discussing what they had just witnessed. The young person realized that humor, when combined with confidence and authenticity, could captivate people in a way that sheer talent sometimes could not. This realization was thrilling, and it made them more determined to continue exploring their new discovery. Backstage, the young person noticed the expressions of other participants. Some looked nervous, others excited, but many seemed unsure how to respond to the unexpected energy that had entered the room. The young person understood that they had shifted something, created a ripple of change that made the environment more lively and playful. It was a small but important lesson. Taking risks, even in the form of a joke, could influence the world around you in meaningful ways. During a brief moment alone, the young person reflected on the courage it had taken to step on stage. Fear had been there, but they had faced it and transformed it into energy. They had learned that vulnerability could be a source of power. that letting go of self-consciousness could create joy not only for themselves, but for others. This insight was deeply satisfying, and it filled them with a sense of accomplishment that they had never experienced before. The young person's friends continued to cheer them on, and the crowd's energy seemed to feed into their own excitement. They felt a growing sense of confidence, not arrogance, but the kind that comes from realizing that you can surprise yourself and others. They started imagining new ideas for future performances, ways to build on the joke, and ways to continue engaging the audience. The possibilities seemed endless, and the excitement was invigorating as the final acts approached. The young person sat with their friends, still laughing at the memory of their performance. The laughter, the applause, the unexpected connection with the audience, all of it felt surreal. They realized that humor, authenticity, and courage could create experiences far more memorable than perfection alone. They felt grateful for the moment, for the chance to explore something new, and for the opportunity to discover a part of themselves they had never known existed. When the talent show ended and the audience began to leave, many people came up to thank the young person personally. They shared how much joy the performance had brought, how unexpected and clever it was, and how it had made the event unforgettable. The young person smiled, humbled and excited, understanding that a simple act of courage and creativity had turned into something far greater than a joke. It had become a shared experience, a memory that people would carry with them, and a glimpse of the potential within themselves. Walking home that evening, the young person felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Their mind kept replaying the reactions, the laughter, and the energy of the room. They thought about how a small idea, something meant only to amuse, had transformed into a meaningful moment of connection and joy. They knew that this was just the beginning, that there were more performances, more opportunities, and more surprises ahead. What started as a simple joke had already changed their perspective on fear, creativity, and the power of stepping into the unknown, and that knowledge filled them with excitement for the journey yet to come. The days following the talent show were unlike anything the young person had ever experienced. People in the town started talking about their performance, sharing stories of the absurd gestures, funny faces, and the surprising energy that had filled the room. Strangers approached them on the street, laughing and saying how clever and entertaining they had been. It was strange and thrilling, and it made them realize that what had begun as a joke had turned into something that genuinely touched people. The young person found themselves thinking about the performance constantly. They replayed every moment in their mind, noticing small details that had made the audience laugh or gasp. Each memory was a reminder of how powerful humor and authenticity could be when combined. They also thought about how nervous they had been initially and how fear had turned into exhilaration. The moment they embraced the absurdity of their idea, the lesson was clear. Stepping out of their comfort zone could lead to unexpected joy and connection at home. They began experimenting with new ideas. They tried out exaggerated movements, played with imaginary props, and added little twists to their gestures. Each attempt was met with laughter from their family, who became their first audience. This experimentation was playful and freeing. Unlike rehearsed performances, these moments allowed them to explore the full range of their creativity without pressure. They began to understand that the more they embraced the silliness, the more engaging their performances became. Word spread quickly in town, and soon the young person received invitations to perform at small gatherings, school events, and community parties. At first, they felt nervous about repeating their performance. The thought of trying to recreate a moment that had felt spontaneous was intimidating. But they reminded themselves that the charm of the act wasn't perfection, it was the willingness to be bold, playful, and authentic. With that mindset, they accepted the invitations and approached each opportunity with curiosity and excitement at the next event. They noticed how much they had changed as a performer. The nerves were still there, but they were now accompanied by confidence and creativity. They added subtle variations to their routine, playing with timing, expression, and improvisation. The audience's reactions were immediate and enthusiastic. People laughed, clapped, and leaned forward in their seats, completely absorbed by the act. The young person felt a deep sense of satisfaction. realizing that their performance had grown beyond the initial joke. It was evolving into a skillful art form that could bring joy and surprise. During one performance, they tried something new. In addition to the exaggerated gestures and silly faces, they added a musical element, using a simple instrument to enhance the humor. The combination of movement, sound, and playful improvisation captivated the audience. Children laughed uncontrollably, adults chuckled and clapped, and even the more serious attendees couldn't help but smile. The young person felt a rush of pride and excitement, knowing that they had discovered a unique way to connect with people. Backstage, their friends and family were amazed at how much the young person had grown. They cheered, laughed, and offered suggestions for new ideas. The young person welcomed the input, appreciating the collaborative spirit and encouragement. Each suggestion sparked new possibilities, and they began to see their performances as a journey of continuous growth rather than a single moment of success. The young person also began to notice the subtle impact of their performances on the audience. People seemed more relaxed, more willing to laugh, and more willing to engage with each other. The energy of the room changed when they performed, creating a sense of shared joy and connection. It was a powerful realization that the act of being playful and genuine could influence the emotions of others in a meaningful way. This understanding motivated them to continue exploring their craft and to push the boundaries of their creativity as the performances continued. The young person experimented with timing and pacing. They learned that pausing at just the right moment could heighten anticipation, that exaggerated gestures could be even more effective when contrasted with stillness, and that subtle facial expressions could amplify the humor. Each audience reaction served as feedback, guiding them to refine their approach. The process was both challenging and exhilarating, requiring observation, intuition, and adaptability. The young person also became more aware of the importance of audience engagement. They started to make eye contact, respond to reactions, and involve spectators in small ways. This interaction created a dynamic experience, making each performance feel alive and unique. The audience was no longer just watching, they were participating, laughing and reacting in ways that shaped the performance itself. The young person found joy in this exchange, realizing that performance was a conversation, not a one-sided display. One evening, after a particularly successful performance at a local gathering, the young person sat with their friends, replaying the moments in their minds. They laughed about the mistakes that had turned into highlights, the spontaneous gestures that had captivated the crowd, and the small improvisations that had added depth to the act. The sense of accomplishment was profound, not just because people had enjoyed the performance, but because they had discovered something important about themselves. They had learned to trust their instincts, embrace vulnerability, find strength and creativity. The young person began to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. What started as a joke, a simple and silly idea, had transformed into a source of confidence, joy, and connection. They realized that taking risks and embracing uncertainty could lead to unexpected growth and discovery. Each performance reinforced this lesson, showing them that the most memorable moments often came from spontaneity and authenticity rather than careful planning and perfection. With each new event, the young person experimented further. They added new elements to their act, explored different forms of humor, and discovered ways to blend playfulness with subtle skill. They noticed how small adjustments could create big reactions, and how listening to the audience could guide the evolution of their performance. The process was iterative, creative, and deeply rewarding. They had moved beyond the original joke and were developing a genuine talent for engaging and entertaining people. The young person also began to think about the impact of their performances beyond the stage. They realized that humor and authenticity could create connections, foster joy, and bring people together in ways that were deeply meaningful. They noticed how friends, family, and even strangers seemed lighter, happier, and more open after experiencing their act. This realization added a sense of purpose to their performances, motivating them to continue exploring their craft and sharing their unique approach with others. As the weeks passed, the young person's confidence grew steadily. They felt more comfortable experimenting with new ideas, improvising, and taking risks on stage. They also became more observant, noticing the subtle cues from the audience and adjusting their performance in real time. This awareness allowed them to create more dynamic and engaging experiences, enhancing the impact of their act. They had discovered a rhythm, a balance between spontaneity and structure, that made each performance compelling and memorable. At one particular performance, the young person tried something daring. They combined multiple elements, humor, movement, sound, and audience interaction, into a single, cohesive act. The audience responded with enthusiastic laughter, applause, and cheers, completely absorbed in the performance. The young person felt a sense of exhilaration and fulfillment that was unmatched by anything they had experienced before. They realized that they had transformed their initial joke into a show that could captivate and delight people, and the feeling was extraordinary. Afterward, they sat with their friends, reflecting on the journey so far. They laughed about the early performances, marveled at the audience reactions, and discussed new ideas for future acts. The young person felt a deep sense of gratitude for the support, encouragement, and inspiration that surrounded them. They also felt a sense of responsibility to continue exploring their talent, to refine their craft, and to create performances that could bring joy and connection to others. The young person's journey of transformation was not just about performance, it was about self-discovery, courage, and creativity. They had learned to embrace vulnerability, trust their instincts, and find strength in humor and authenticity. They had discovered the power of connection, the joy of shared laughter, and the satisfaction of creating memorable experiences. What began as a simple joke had evolved into a meaningful pursuit, and the young person was eager to continue exploring the possibilities by the end of this period. The young person had grown in ways they never imagined. They had learned to navigate fear, harness creativity, and connect with audiences in meaningful ways. Each performance built upon the last, creating a foundation of confidence, skill, and insight. They had discovered a unique talent, one that combined humor, authenticity, and engagement, and they were excited to continue developing it. The journey that began as a joke was now a path of exploration, growth, and discovery, and the young person was ready to see where it would lead next. The day of the next big performance arrived, and the young person felt a familiar mixture of excitement and nerves. Unlike before, however, there was a growing sense of confidence. They knew that the audience had seen their previous performances, and people were curious to see what they would do next. This time, the young person wanted to push the limits of their act, to combine humor, timing, and creativity in a way that would surprise and delight everyone in the room. They had learned so much through trial, error, and experimentation. And now it was time to put everything into one cohesive performance. Backstage, the atmosphere was charged. Participants were warming up, chatting, and preparing their acts. The young person took a quiet moment to themselves, stretching, taking deep breaths, and visualizing the act in their mind. They thought about the audience, the energy in the room, the ways in which their previous performances had captivated people. The plan for this performance was simple on paper, but ambitious in execution. It was a blend of physical comedy, expressive gestures, subtle improvisation, and interaction with the audience. Every element had been considered carefully, yet it retained the spontaneous, playful quality that had made the earlier performances so successful. When the young person stepped onto the stage, the audience greeted them with curiosity and anticipation. There was a sense that everyone knew something fun was about to happen. At first, they started with small gestures and exaggerated expressions, easing into the performance. The audience laughed and responded immediately, and the young person felt a surge of energy. Encouraged by the reaction, they began to layer additional elements onto the act, including improvised movements, playful interactions with imaginary objects, and comedic timing that they had honed over previous performances. The young person noticed that the audience was completely engaged. People leaned forward in their seats, laughed loudly, and occasionally gasped in surprise. Children were clapping along, while adults shared knowing smiles. It was clear that this performance had captured the collective imagination of the room. The young person felt a deep sense of connection. realizing that the act was no longer just a performance, but an experience that included everyone in the audience. As the performance continued, the young person introduced new and unexpected elements. They acted as though everyday objects on stage were alive, creating a series of amusing interactions that made the audience laugh and gasp in amazement. Timing became crucial, and they skillfully balanced exaggerated movements with moments of stillness, allowing anticipation to build and then releasing it with perfectly timed gestures. Each element was carefully executed, yet it retained a playful spontaneity that made it feel fresh and alive. The young person also began to involve the audience directly. They gestured toward certain spectators, encouraged playful participation, and responded to reactions in real time. The audience's laughter, applause, and cheers became part of the performance, creating a dynamic interaction that elevated the act to a new level. This exchange of energy was exhilarating, and the young person felt a growing sense of mastery over the performance. They realized that the act was not just about them, it was about the shared experience of joy and laughter with the audience. Midway through the performance, the young person attempted a particularly daring sequence. They combined multiple movements, gestures, and expressions into a single, fluid routine. The audience responded with raucous laughter, applause, and delighted gasps. Even the judges, who had initially been skeptical, were clearly impressed by the creativity, timing, and execution. The young person felt a rush of pride and exhilaration, knowing that they had transformed a simple joke into a sophisticated and engaging performance that resonated deeply with the audience. As the performance reached its climax, the young person executed the final act with precision and flair. They created a surprising twist that caught the audience off guard, a combination of physical comedy, expressive gestures, and an unexpected visual gag that tied together the narrative of the performance. The reaction was instantaneous. The room erupted in laughter, applause, and cheers, with many people rising to their feet. The young person felt a wave of exhilaration, joy, and disbelief. They had managed to deliver a show-stopping moment, a culmination of creativity, practice, and instinct that exceeded even their own expectations. The young person paused for a moment to take in the audience's reaction. Faces were lit up with smiles, laughter, and awe. People were pointing, laughing, and sharing their excitement with those around them. The energy in the room was electric, and the young person realized that this was the pinnacle of what they had been building toward. The act had grown beyond a simple joke. It had become a shared experience. It brought joy and amazement to everyone present. After the final gesture and bow, the young person stepped back, allowing the audience's applause to wash over them. The cheers, laughter, and clapping were overwhelming. They could feel the energy of the crowd, the collective excitement that had been building throughout the performance. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, and the young person felt a deep sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. The performance had not only entertained, but had created a moment of connection and shared joy that would be remembered long after the event ended. Backstage, the young person's friends and family were ecstatic. They hugged, laughed, and shared their excitement, pointing out the highlights and clever moments of the act. The young person felt a profound sense of gratitude for the support and encouragement that had surrounded them from the beginning. They realized that while the performance had been a personal triumph, it had also been a collaborative experience, fueled by the energy, laughter, and enthusiasm of those who had supported them along the way. As the evening continued and the final acts were completed, the young person reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had started as a simple joke had evolved into something extraordinary, a show-stopping performance that showcased creativity, humor, and authenticity. They thought about the moments of nervousness, the laughter of the audience, and the thrill of discovering their own capabilities. Each step had been a learning experience, a chance to grow, experiment, and embrace the unexpected. The young person also recognized the impact of the performance on the audience. People had laughed, cheered, and shared in the joy of the act. The performance had created a sense of community, a shared experience that brought people together in delight and amusement. It was a powerful reminder that creativity and humor could transcend skill and perfection, connecting people on a deeper emotional level. Walking home later that night, the young person felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Their mind replayed the performance in vivid detail, the gestures, the expressions, the interactions with the audience. In the final show-stopping moment, each memory reinforced the realization that taking risks, embracing creativity, and being willing to be playful and vulnerable could lead to extraordinary results. They understood that this was only the beginning, that there were more opportunities, more moments, and more experiences to explore. The young person also began thinking about the lessons learned from the journey. They had discovered the power of humor, timing, and authenticity, as well as the importance of engaging with the audience and responding to their reactions. They had learned to trust their instincts, experiment freely, and embrace the unexpected. Most importantly, they had discovered the joy of connecting with others through creativity, laughter, and shared experience. These insights would guide them in future performances and in many other aspects of life. In the days that followed, the young person reflected on how far they had come. From a simple joke, they had grown into a performer capable of captivating an audience, creating memorable moments and inspiring joy. The journey had been filled with challenges, experimentation, and self-discovery. Each performance built upon the last, refining skills, timing, and creativity. What had started as a playful, silly act had transformed into a meaningful pursuit, one that showcased talent, courage, and the ability to connect with people in a powerful way. The young person also began to think about the future they imagined. New performances, incorporating humor, improvisation, and audience engagement in increasingly creative ways. They considered how to continue evolving, exploring new ideas, and pushing the boundaries of their craft. The excitement was palpable, and they felt a renewed sense of purpose and motivation. The show-stopping performance had shown them what was possible, and they were eager to continue the journey, discovering new heights of creativity, connection, and joy. The young person knew that the experience had changed them. They had learned to embrace risk, trust their instincts, and find strength in creativity. They had discovered the joy of connecting with others through humor and performance, and the power of turning a simple joke into something extraordinary. As they walked through the quiet streets, they felt a sense of pride, excitement, and anticipation for what lay ahead. The journey was far from over, and the possibilities were endless. What started as a joke had become a transformative experience, a show-stopping performance, and a glimpse into the incredible potential that lay within them. In the days and weeks after the show-stopping performance, the young person experienced a whirlwind of emotions. The laughter, applause, and cheers still echoed in their mind, and people continued to talk about the act wherever they went. Strangers would approach them on the street, neighbors would mention it in passing, and friends and family kept bringing it up in conversation. The sense of connection and recognition was unlike anything they had ever experienced. It was both humbling and exhilarating, and it made them realize just how far the journey had taken them from that first silly joke. The young person reflected on everything that had happened, from the nervousness before the first performance to the growing confidence and creativity that developed through experimentation. They thought about the courage it had taken to step onto the stage, the risk of embarrassment, and the willingness to embrace absurdity. Every choice, every risk, and every playful moment had contributed to something greater than they had imagined. The joke had evolved into a meaningful, transformative experience, and the young person felt a deep sense of pride. Opportunities began to appear unexpectedly. Invitations to perform at local events, school functions, and even small festivals started arriving. People wanted to see the act again, and they were eager to witness the creativity and humor that had made the previous performance unforgettable. At first, the young person felt nervous about these new opportunities. Magic of a moment that had felt so spontaneous. But they quickly realized that each performance did not need to be identical. The joy was in improvisation, connection, and embracing whatever happened in the moment. Each new performance brought its own lessons. The young person experimented with timing, gestures, and interactions with the audience. They refined the act, learning how to balance humor with moments of surprise, how to include the audience in subtle ways, and how to adapt to the energy of the room. These experiences strengthened their confidence and creativity, showing them that they had more control over their craft than they had ever realized. What had started as a joke was now a skill that could be developed, shared, and enjoyed by many. The young person also noticed the impact of their performances beyond the immediate audience. People who had attended the shows spoke about them with excitement and joy long after the event. Children imitated the gestures at home. Families laughed while recounting the moments. And friends shared stories with those who hadn't been present. The performance had created a ripple effect, spreading happiness and entertainment in ways that the young person had never anticipated. They began to understand that what they did on stage could influence emotions and bring people together in meaningful ways. As the attention grew, the young person remained grounded, focusing on the joy of performing rather than seeking recognition or fame. They took pride in the laughter, smiles, and delight they brought to others. Each performance became an opportunity to experiment, connect, and express themselves fully. They no longer worried about perfection or judgment. Instead, they embraced authenticity, spontaneity, and creativity as their guiding principles. This mindset allowed the act to evolve continuously, keeping it fresh, engaging, and enjoyable. One day, a local event organizer approached them with a special invitation to perform at a larger gathering. The young person felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The stakes were higher, the audience larger, and the expectations greater. But they also felt ready. They had learned to trust their instincts, read the audience, and adapt in real time. They knew that the performance was about connection, humor, and creativity, and that if they stayed true to these principles, the act would resonate. During this performance, the young person incorporated all the lessons they had learned. They balanced exaggerated gestures with subtle timing, involved the audience in clever ways, and maintained a sense of playfulness that kept the act lively. The crowd responded with laughter, applause, and engagement, creating a dynamic and joyful atmosphere. The young person felt a surge of fulfillment and satisfaction, realizing that the journey from a simple joke to a polished, engaging performance had reached a new level. They were not only entertaining people, but also creating moments of shared joy and connection that would be remembered. After the performance, the young person sat with their friends and family, replaying the act in their minds. They laughed about mistakes that had become highlights, discussed clever improvisations, and celebrated the audience's reactions. The sense of accomplishment was profound. It's not just because the performance had been successful, but because it had revealed the young person's potential and creativity. They had transformed fear, uncertainty, and a simple joke into a powerful experience that resonated with others. It fostered connection. The experience also taught the young person valuable life lessons. They realized that courage, creativity, and authenticity could lead to extraordinary results. They learned to embrace vulnerability, take risks, and trust their instincts. They discovered that humor and playfulness could bridge gaps, create connections, and inspire joy. And most importantly, they understood that the journey was just as important as the destination, the process of experimenting. Learning and growing was itself a reward. As time went on, the young person continued to perform, each time discovering new ways to engage, amuse, and surprise their audience. They explored different forms of humor, refined gestures, and experimented with timing, sound, and expression. The performances became more sophisticated while retaining the playful spontaneity that had made the first joke so successful. Each show was an opportunity to explore creativity, connect with others, continue the journey of self-discovery. The young person also began to mentor others who were interested in performing. They shared their experiences, offering advice on improvisation, audience engagement, and embracing creativity. They encouraged others to take risks, trust themselves, and find joy in the process. Through mentoring, they discovered the satisfaction of helping others grow, and they realized that the lessons they had learned could inspire and empower more people than they had initially imagined. Community recognition grew as well. People admired not just the performance, but the courage, creativity, and authenticity behind it. The young person became a symbol of how boldness, humor, and imagination could transform an ordinary moment into something extraordinary. They were invited to share their story, participate in workshops, and collaborate on creative projects. Each opportunity reinforced the understanding that a simple idea, pursued with courage and creativity, could have far-reaching impact. Through it all, the young person remained humble and grounded. They never forgot the nervousness before the first performance, or the thrill of discovering that a joke could become something remarkable. They appreciated the support of friends, family, and community. Recognizing that the journey had been shaped by shared experiences, encouragement, and collaboration, they remained focused on joy, connection, and creativity, ensuring that each performance was authentic, engaging, and meaningful. In private moments, the young person reflected on the lessons learned. They understood that fear could be transformed into energy, that spontaneity could lead to brilliance, and that connection with others was the ultimate reward. They realized that talent was not only about skill, but also about creativity, authenticity, and the courage to take risks. These insights shaped not only their performances, but also their approach to life, relationships, and personal growth. Over time, the young person's journey became a source of inspiration. People spoke about how a simple joke had evolved into a powerful, show-stopping performance. Others admired the way the young person had embraced creativity, taken risks, and connected with audiences. The story of transformation from fear and uncertainty to confidence, mastery, and shared joy resonated with many, demonstrating the value of courage, authenticity, and the willingness to explore the unknown.